It was a night like no other. The venue was a masterpiece of opulence, a grand ballroom that gleamed under the light of hundreds of crystal chandeliers, casting a warm golden glow over the scene. The air was filled with the soft hum of polite conversation, laughter, and the clink of champagne glasses as the rich and famous of the entertainment industry swirled through the room in their finest attire. They wore their wealth and status like a badge of honor, each person more polished than the last, their designer dresses and tuxedos glimmering under the ambient lights. It was the kind of gala where every detail was perfect, from the lavish decor to the exquisite hors d'oeuvres that seemed to appear out of nowhere. In the midst of this extravagant world stood Keanu Reeves, one of Hollywood's most beloved actors. With his signature modesty and kind-hearted nature, Keanu was, without a doubt, one of the most genuine people in the room. He had always been humble about his success, preferring a simpler lifestyle that kept him away from the pressures of the Hollywood elite. But even Keanu couldn't turn down the invitation to this prestigious event. After all, it was an honor to be recognized in such high regard, even if he wasn't someone who typically enjoyed the glitz and glam of these kinds of gatherings. However, from the moment Keanu stepped into the gala, he could feel the stark contrast between his unassuming nature and the world of wealth and exclusivity surrounding him. While some greeted him with polite smiles and casual nods, it was clear that he was not fully accepted into the inner circle. It was the subtle things, the cold stares from some of the more established celebrities, the hushed whispers as he walked by, and the way people seemed to avert their gaze just slightly when he caught their eye. They didn't say it outright, but Keanu could feel the tension, the unspoken divide between him and the rest of the guests. It wasn't that people were openly rude to him, but the exclusion was so apparent that it became impossible to ignore. In this world, Keanu was the actor who played in action movies, not the glamorous A-list figure that most of the other guests embodied. He wasn't a part of their exclusive world of luxury, designer brands, and private jets. To them, Keanu was just a working actor, someone who was famous for his role as a humble action hero but not someone worthy of their status. And while that might not have bothered many others, it stung Keanu deeply. As Keanu tried to navigate the room, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was an outsider. He walked through the crowd, a quiet and thoughtful presence in the midst of an otherwise boisterous and vibrant gathering. He found himself standing alone at the bar, nursing a drink and watching the interactions around him. The elegant people in their tuxedos and gowns moved like they were part of a perfectly choreographed dance. Each conversation an elaborate performance, each smile calculated. Keanu, by contrast, simply felt like he was in the wrong place. Trying to blend in, Keanu did what he often did in moments like this. He kept to himself, avoiding the spotlight and trying to make himself as invisible as possible. But no matter how hard he tried to slip under the radar, the feeling of isolation wouldn't leave. He was surrounded by people, but in that moment, he felt more alone than ever. The whispers and stares continued, like a low hum in the background. It wasn't blatant cruelty, but it was enough to make Keanu feel small. The guests around him seemed to focus on anyone but him, eager to discuss the latest fashion trends or exchange stories about their lavish vacations. Keanu had tried to fit in, but the divide between him and the others felt insurmountable. As the night went on, he started to retreat further into the background, nursing his drink and wishing the evening would just end. But Keanu's quiet evening was about to take an unexpected turn. Just as the weight of the isolation seemed unbearable, something remarkable happened that changed the entire dynamic of the evening. As Keanu stood by himself trying to shake off the feeling of being unwanted, the door to the grand ballroom opened. The room fell silent for a moment, the noise of clinking glasses and low murmurs fading into a soft buzz. A figure had entered, and in an instant the atmosphere shifted. The man who walked into the room was none other than Richard Gere, one of Hollywood's most iconic figures. His presence was magnetic, and as soon as he entered, a quiet respect filled the air. Richard was the epitome of class, confidence, and humility, someone who had managed to remain grounded despite decades of stardom. As he walked into the room, heads turned, and conversations quieted. Richard wasn't just another celebrity, he was someone who commanded the room with his mere presence. But what truly made the difference was the way Richard interacted with Keanu. Without any hesitation, Richard's gaze found Keanu across the room. And instead of walking past or avoiding him, Richard made a beeline toward him, a warm smile on his face. As he approached, Keanu's isolation seemed to dissolve. Richard's approach was not one of forced politeness, but of genuine warmth. "Keanu, my friend," Richard said, offering a handshake. "It's good to see you. I'm glad you could make it." Keanu, caught off guard but deeply moved, returned the smile. The simple act of kindness from Richard immediately lifted Keanu's spirits. Richard Gere's warm reception was the antidote to the loneliness Keanu had been feeling all evening. The atmosphere around them seemed to soften as Richard's calm energy radiated through the room. It was as if his presence had changed the entire dynamic of the evening, making everyone, including Keanu, feel more comfortable and valued. In that moment, Keanu realized that sometimes all it takes is one person's genuine kindness to turn an entire situation around. Richard Gere had shown him that despite the coldness of the world around him, there were still people who cared, people who saw beyond the surface and understood the importance of kindness. As the evening went on, Keanu no longer felt like an outsider. The warmth Richard had extended to him had opened the door to real connections, and Keanu's night, which had started with isolation and rejection, had ended on a note of acceptance and friendship. This expanded version adds more detail to Keanu's experience at the gala and emphasizes the turning point where Richard Gere's kindness changes the entire atmosphere of the event. As Keanu sipped his drink, trying to steady his nerves and enjoy the moment, a conversation caught his attention. Two guests nearby were discussing his latest movie, and it quickly became clear that the tone of the conversation was far from complimentary. The words were laced with mockery, their voices dripping with sarcasm as they criticized his performance. "Keanu Reeves," one of them scoffed. "I can't believe he's here. He's not even a real actor, just a guy who plays action heroes. He'll never fit in with the true stars of Hollywood." The sting of the comment hit Keanu like a slap to the face, but he tried to stay composed. He took a long sip of his drink and attempted to brush off their remarks. After all, this wasn't the first time someone had made a comment like that about him. Keanu had always been able to shrug off harsh criticism, especially from people who didn't understand the value of his work or the effort he put into his roles. But the conversation didn't end there. A moment later, one of the guests, well-known director in the industry, approached Keanu directly. The director, wearing a smug smile and an air of superiority, didn't offer a handshake or even a friendly greeting. Instead, he fixed Keanu with a look of disdain and asked pointedly, "Do you honestly think you have the talent to be at a gala like this? Do you even belong here?" Keanu was taken aback. It wasn't just the words that stung, but the coldness in the director's voice, the arrogance that dripped from every syllable. This wasn't some anonymous comment from a passerby. It was an attack on his very place in the room. Keanu had worked for years in the industry, earning his spot through hard work, dedication, and a relentless commitment to his craft. Yet, in that moment, it felt as though everything he had worked for was being stripped away by one person's cruel words. His smile, which had been carefully placed on his face, started to fade. The warmth of the evening that had once filled the air now felt like a distant memory. The laughter and chatter of the gala no longer seemed welcoming. Instead, they felt like a cruel reminder of how far Keanu had fallen from the world he had worked so hard to be a part of. Keanu didn't know how to respond at first. He was used to the occasional snide remark or offhand comment, but this was different. It was a personal attack aimed not just at his acting, but at his worth as a person in the industry. For a moment, he was speechless, his mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. But he quickly realized that reacting in anger would only give this director the satisfaction of seeing him unravel. Keanu wasn't that type of person. He was humble, introspective, and thoughtful, and he had learned long ago that people who try to tear others down often don't deserve a response. So, Keanu took a deep breath, letting the words roll off him, like water off a duck's back. But as he did, the sting of humiliation lingered. It wasn't just about the comments. It was the realization that, in a room full of stars, the one person who had worked his way to the top was now being made to feel like an outsider, like he didn't belong. This was the very world he had dreamed of entering, the world where his talent and dedication should have been enough to earn him respect. But in that moment it felt like all his hard work had been forgotten, overshadowed by the glitz and glamour of the elite few who controlled the industry. Keanu quietly excused himself from the conversation, retreating to a corner of the room. He needed space to collect himself, to breathe. As he found a secluded spot, he leaned against the wall, trying to steady his racing heart. The noise of the gala seemed distant now, like it was happening in another world. He couldn't help but feel the weight of every unspoken judgment that lingered in the air. The harshness of the moment left him feeling isolated, like he didn't belong in this world, despite everything he had done to get there. In that moment, Keanu felt a profound sense of vulnerability, something he wasn't used to feeling. He had always been the person to lift others up, to stay grounded and focused on his craft. But now he was the one who felt knocked down. The sting of humiliation wasn't just about the words that were said. It was about the reminder that no matter how far he had come, he could still be made to feel small in the eyes of others. But Keanu wasn't one to dwell in self-pity for long. He took another deep breath, reminding himself that he had faced worse challenges than this, that his worth was not defined by the opinions of a few arrogant people at a gala. He reminded himself that he had built a career not on the approval of others but on his own dedication and passion for acting, and he would continue to do so, no matter how many people tried to tear him down. As the night wore on, Keanu gathered his composure and left the corner where he had been hiding. He didn't let the humiliation define him. Instead, he walked back into the room with his head held high, ready to face whatever came next. Because at the end of the day, Keanu Reeves knew that no amount of judgment or exclusion could ever take away the value of who he was, not just as an actor, but as a person. Just when it seemed like Keanu's night couldn't get worse, fate had other plans. The door to the grand ballroom opened with a soft creak, and the entire atmosphere of the room shifted. It wasn't just the sound of the door that caught everyone's attention. It was the presence of the man who had just entered. The moment Richard Gere walked in, the room seemed to pause for a beat, as if in awe of his entrance. Richard Gere, the suave and beloved Hollywood legend, moved with an effortless grace, a timeless charisma that captivated everyone in the room. His stylish yet understated attire, coupled with his calm and collected demeanor, commanded immediate respect. It wasn't just his looks or his fame that had this effect, it was the aura of kindness and class that radiated from him. In an instant, the entire room seemed to shift its energy, as if Richard's arrival had swept through like a wave of calm, washing away the tension and pretentiousness that had lingered in the air. Keanu, who had been quietly nursing his drink, in the corner, caught a glimpse of the crowd's sudden change in energy. Everyone's eyes seemed to follow Richard as he made his way further into the ballroom, and Keanu, still reeling from his earlier experience, couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over him. It wasn't just the shift in atmosphere that lifted his spirits, but the sheer presence of Richard. The legendary actor had the ability to make anyone in the room feel seen and valued, regardless of their status. Richard's eyes scanned the room as he moved through the crowd, and when he noticed Keanu standing alone in the corner, it was as if the universe had aligned to give Keanu exactly what he needed. Without hesitation, Richard made his way through the crowd, weaving effortlessly between guests. Despite the glamorous surroundings and the throngs of people surrounding him, Richard's attention was singular. It was as though he could see Keanu in that moment of quiet isolation and knew exactly what he needed. As Richard reached Keanu, he greeted him with a warm, sincere handshake and an expression of genuine warmth. The way Richard's smile seemed to light up the room was a testament to the kindness he exuded, a kindness that could melt even the coldest of hearts. "Keanu," he said, his voice filled with warmth, "it's good to see you. I hope you're enjoying the evening." The simplicity and sincerity of Richard's words hit Keanu in a way he hadn't expected. It wasn't just the recognition of his presence, it was the genuine care and consideration in Richard's tone. The tension that had been building in the room and the weight of Keanu's earlier humiliation seemed to melt away as Richard's kindness filled the air. It was as though the entire atmosphere had shifted with just a few words, and for the first time that evening, Keanu felt truly seen. Keanu, caught off guard, but deeply moved by Richard's warmth, couldn't help but smile genuinely. He had admired Richard for years, not just for his acting skills but for his ability to remain grounded and humble in a world that often rewarded the opposite. Richard had always seemed like a beacon of authenticity in an industry filled with artifice, and Keanu had long respected him for that. In a sea of people whose smiles often seemed forced and insincere, Richard's kindness felt like a breath of fresh air. For a moment, Keanu forgot about the sting of the earlier conversation, the cold stares, and the whispered comments. Richard's gesture had a profound impact on him. It wasn't about fame or status. It was about the simple act of treating someone with respect and kindness, regardless of who they were. In that moment, Keanu realized that sometimes the people who make the most difference in your life aren't the ones with the loudest voices or the most glamorous resumes. They're the ones who take the time to acknowledge your presence and offer a kind word when you need it most. As the two men stood there, sharing a quiet moment of connection, the people around them began to notice. The previously icy atmosphere in the room seemed to thaw, and the guests who had been cold and distant earlier now found themselves drawn to the warmth of Richard and Keanu's exchange. Richard's natural charisma had a ripple effect, and it wasn't long before other guests began to approach Keanu, offering smiles and greetings. The subtle shift in the room was undeniable, and Keanu couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude wash over him. In the end, it wasn't just the glamour of the event or the applause of the crowd that made the night memorable. It was the unexpected kindness of one person that had the power to transform Keanu's entire experience. Richard Gere, with his calm demeanor and unwavering kindness, had shown Keanu that even in the most superficial of settings, it was still possible to find authenticity and human connection. Keanu left the gala that evening feeling a sense of peace he hadn't expected to find. He had walked in feeling like an outsider, unsure of his place in a world that often seemed to value everything except what truly mattered. But thanks to Richard's act of kindness, he had found not just a sense of belonging, but a reminder that kindness was the most powerful force in any room. And in that moment, Keanu knew that the real measure of a person's worth wasn't in their fame, their wealth, or their status. It was in the kindness they extended to others. Richard Gere didn't stop there. He wasn't just there for a quick greeting or a polite exchange of pleasantries. No, Richard was known for his authenticity, and he was determined to make Keanu feel comfortable in a room that had previously made him feel like an outsider. As the conversation unfolded, Richard asked Keanu not just about his work, but about his life beyond Hollywood, the things that truly mattered to him. "Keanu," Richard began, "I've always admired the way you've carried yourself in this industry, but what do you do outside of the movies? What brings you joy when you're not in front of the camera?" Keanu was taken aback by the genuine curiosity in Richard's voice. Most people in Hollywood only cared about the next big project or the latest gossip. But here was someone asking about his true self, someone who wanted to know what made him tick beyond the film roles he played. Keanu, ever humble, smiled and began talking about his love for motorcycles, his passion for giving back to communities, and his quiet moments of reflection. He spoke candidly about his journey in Hollywood, how it had shaped him, and his desire to remain grounded despite the chaos of fame. The more Keanu spoke, the more Richard listened. It was as if Richard had a way of making the world around them disappear, and in that moment it was just the two of them, two people who shared a mutual respect for each other. Keanu felt seen in a way he hadn't all evening, and for the first time that night he felt like he was more than just an actor. He felt like he was a person, valued for his thoughts and his heart, not just for the roles he played on screen. Their conversation, rich with respect and understanding, naturally drew the attention of others in the room. It wasn't just curiosity that pulled people toward them, it was the sincerity they shared. Richard's genuine kindness toward Keanu had a ripple effect. People who had been previously aloof or dismissive now seemed to take notice. They could see the ease and warmth in Richard's approach, and it made them rethink their initial judgment of Keanu. As the group around them grew, a sense of camaraderie began to spread. The guests who had once made Keanu feel invisible were now engaged in the conversation, their earlier coldness replaced by friendly smiles and genuine interest. The room, once filled with subtle judgment and exclusion, was now filled with the sounds of laughter, meaningful exchanges, and the soft clinking of glasses. The change was subtle but undeniable. The kindness that Richard had extended to Keanu had begun to transform the entire dynamic of the evening. The most remarkable part was how Richard's simple act of kindness seemed to break down the barriers that had once divided people. Richard didn't just act out of kindness for Keanu. His actions served as a model for the others in the room. One by one, the guests began to mirror Richard's behavior. The people who had snubbed Keanu earlier now approached him, offering warm smiles and making an effort to engage with him in a way that was respectful and genuine. It wasn't that Keanu suddenly became the center of attention or was fawned over by the entire room. It was more profound than that. The night had shifted. The atmosphere had gone from one of exclusion to one of inclusion. People were no longer judging based on reputation or status, but instead were engaging with each other on a human level. Richard had set the tone, and now others were following suit. It was as if Richard's kindness had created a ripple effect that softened the entire room. By the time the evening was drawing to a close, Keanu had transformed from the lonely guest at the edge of the room to a respected and valued presence. Not because he had anything to prove, but because he had been shown respect and kindness. He had been treated like an equal, like someone worthy of genuine connection, not just a name to be recognized or a face to be admired. It was a powerful reminder of how small acts of kindness could reshape an entire situation. As Keanu left the gala that night, he didn't feel the weight of judgment or the sting of exclusion. Instead, he carried with him a sense of belonging that hadn't been there before. And as for Richard Gere, his simple, thoughtful actions had made a lasting impact, not just on Keanu, but on the entire room. He had reminded everyone that kindness, respect, and authentic human connection were far more powerful than fame, wealth, or status. It was a lesson Keanu would carry with him long after the night ended. By the end of the night, Keanu had gone from being the subject of whispers and exclusion to becoming the center of attention, for all the right reasons. Richard Gere's simple, yet profound act of kindness had completely turned the night around. What had started as an evening of discomfort and loneliness for Keanu had transformed into one of warmth and connection. Richard's sincerity, his genuine interest in Keanu as a person, not just as an actor, had made all the difference. Keanu, ever humble and grounded, found himself in an entirely different environment. The people who had once turned their backs or whispered behind his back were now offering him friendly smiles, eager to engage in meaningful conversation. It wasn't the fame or recognition that had made the difference. It was the simple human act of kindness from one of Hollywood's most respected and beloved figures. As the gala came to a close, Keanu could hardly believe how the evening had unfolded. He had entered the night feeling like an outsider, unsure of his place in this glittering world of high society. But by the end, he had found himself surrounded by genuine people, receiving the respect he had long deserved. Richard's kindness had sparked a ripple effect, one that led others to treat Keanu with the same respect and sincerity that Richard had shown him from the beginning. Keanu left the gala that night with a sense of relief and gratitude. It wasn't just about surviving the evening. It was about thriving in a situation where he had once felt alienated. The kindness that Richard had extended to him had not only made him feel valued, but it had also given him a renewed sense of belonging. And that feeling of acceptance was more valuable than any award or accolade. The moral of the story? Kindness has the power to change everything. In a world where superficial judgments and societal expectations often lead the way, It only takes one person's genuine care to shift the atmosphere and create lasting change. Richard Gere didn't just change Keanu's night, he changed the entire dynamic of the room. He reminded everyone that kindness is not a weakness, but a force capable of breaking down walls, bridging divides, and making everyone feel human. Again, it's a simple lesson, but one that carries immeasurable power, that kindness can transform the world, one small act at a time.